At this point, buying a Seiko has become a very specific emotional experience because every Seiko owner at some point ends up saying the same thing. First, you complain about bezel alignment. Then you move on to complaining about the bracelet, which I've done so myself. Then you find yourself complaining about price increases. Then, somehow, 3 weeks later, you end up buying another Seiko? It's honestly one of the most fascinating relationships in the entire watch hobby. Seiko collectors will actually spend 20 minutes talking about why Seiko has lost its mind while actively shopping for another turtle at the same time. And that raises a pretty interesting question, because for years, Seiko was the undisputed king of value in watches. If somebody wanted their first mechanical watch, everybody would say the same thing.
Get a Seiko.
But today, prices are climbing, competition is stronger than ever, and a lot of collectors are questioning whether or not Seiko still deserves that crown. So today, let's talk about it.
I am the king! I will punish you.
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
Now, to understand why this conversation even matters, we have to go back a little bit, because there was a point in time where Seiko absolutely dominated the affordable mechanical watch market. And I mean dominated. You wanted a dive watch under $500? Seiko. Field watch? Seiko. Everyday automatic? Seiko. It almost didn't matter what category of watch you were asking about. The answer would circle back to Seiko eventually. And honestly, there was a reason for that. The brand offered this combination that was incredibly hard to beat. Mechanical movements, tons of heritage, reliable designs, and prices that felt accessible. Watches like the SKX 007 became legendary because they weren't trying to be luxury products. They were just honest, durable, affordable tool watches. And people loved them for it. The SKX especially became almost a rite of passage for collectors. At some point, half the people in this hobby either owned one, modded one, or regretted selling one, which honestly is basically the entire watch hobby. Buying watches, selling watches, and then emotionally revisiting those decisions at 2 in the morning. Another huge reason Seiko became so beloved is their variety. Seiko simply doesn't just make one kind of watch. They make everything. Divers, dress watches, GMTs, chronographs, field watches, quirky Japan exclusive releases, tuna cans that look like underwater military equipment. It's all there. At almost every price point too. And because of that, Seiko became this kind of gateway brand into watch collecting. You buy one Seiko, then you buy another, then you find yourself online arguing about movement calibers and chapter rings. Seiko is basically the hobby's onboarding process. But what made the brand especially dangerous to people's wallets was its emotional value. Because Seiko watches have personality. A turtle feels completely different from a samurai. And a monster feels completely different from an alpinist. And somehow, even their imperfections became part of the charm. Which sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud. Imagine saying this to a normal person.
Yeah, the bezel's slightly crooked, but it gives the watch character.
That sounds insane outside of the hobby, but inside the hobby, totally normal behavior. But over the past several years, things shifted. Seiko's prices started climbing, and not just a little bit. Watches that used to sit comfortably in the $300 to $500 range started creeping upward. Then some prospects models crossed into the $1,000 range, and collectors started to have a very difficult conversation. Because when Seikos cost $200 to $300, people forgive a lot, but when they start creeping towards luxury pricing, expectations change. That slightly misaligned bezel that people used to laugh off becomes a lot harder to ignore. And this is where the internet really started heating up. You began to see people saying things like, I love Seiko, but for this price, I don't know. Which honestly is kind of the current state of discourse on Seiko at the moment. It's not just that Seiko got more expensive, it's also that other brands got better. Years ago, Seiko almost owned this category uncontested, but now the market is crowded. Brands like Christopher Ward, Baltic, Tissot, Citizen, Laurier, and Zelos have all stepped into this enthusiast-focused space. And many of them offer things collectors care about today. Better finishing, tighter tolerances, sapphire crystals, upgraded bracelets, and better regulation. Meanwhile, Seiko still somehow feels like Seiko, which is both a compliment and a criticism at the same time. And this is where the argument gets complicated, because on paper, there are definitely other brands offering better specs for the money. But watches are emotional objects. Nobody falls in love with the spec sheet. If that were true, we'd all just wear spreadsheets on our wrists. Now, we also need to talk about the SKX discontinuation, because this mattered to collectors emotionally way more than Seiko probably thought. The SKX wasn't just affordable, it represented what people loved about the brand. It was accessible, moddable, durable, and fun. It felt like a watch for the actual enthusiasts. But when Seiko discontinued it, a lot of collectors felt like an era had ended. because the SKX represented old Seiko, back when value was untouchable. Back when people recommended Seiko without hesitation. And I think today that's why pricing conversations get so emotional. People aren't just comparing numbers, they're comparing eras. They're comparing modern Seiko with the version that they fell in love with years ago. And honestly, Seiko still does design incredibly well. That's something that people sometimes overlook in the spec war, is that Seiko watches are still distinct. You can usually recognize them from across the room, and that matters. Because a lot of today's technically impressive watches feel a little bit sterile. Seiko watches feel alive, even the weird ones. Especially the weird ones, actually. So now we get to the big question. Is Seiko still the king of value? And honestly, I think the answer is kind of, but definitely not in the same way they used to be years ago. Seiko used to be the obvious answer. Now, they're one answer among many. The market evolved and competition improved. Collectors became more demanding, and Seiko moved further up market. But despite all of that, the brand still has something that's incredibly difficult to replicate: emotional connection. People care about Seiko in ways that they may not care about for a lot of other brands. And in a hobby built almost entirely on emotion, that matters. Seiko may not be the undisputed king of value anymore, but I also think it's impossible to tell the story of modern watch collecting without Seiko right at the center of it. Because for so many collectors, including a lot of you probably watching this video, Seiko wasn't just a watch brand. It was the beginning of the hobby itself. And honestly, that kind of value is pretty hard to measure. Thanks for watching today, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a like and comment down below and let me know what your favorite Seiko model is. And also, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I've got new content like this coming out every week, so hit that subscribe button to stay in the loop. Until next time, peace.